Hi, everyone. My name is Alix Shield, and I am a settler scholar and lecturer in the Department of Indigenous Studies at Simon Fraser University, which is located in Burnaby, British Columbia, Canada. My project for the Champions program is called Understanding the Principles of Care, Fair, and OCAP in the Context of Localized Indigenous Communities. So I'm just going to go through my project summary here. My initial vision statement is different than what you see here. So I'm going to start maybe by reading that. So initially, I had thought that I would be working kind of with the same group of people with allied university colleagues to improve upon an existing open source database of Indigenous authors and writing in Canada with the goal of making this database more accessible and useful for scholars working with Indigenous data, and also for those communities that are represented in the database. So initially, I had thought that I could address kind of these multiple user groups in this project, but I have realized now that the needs of academic researchers and scholars are quite different than those of, say, Indigenous communities. So, thinking through how to make this data useful for Indigenous communities is an extension of this project that I hope to work on in the future. Um, but essentially, the project is working with data that has been gathered in an existing database. So the project is called The People and the Text, and it includes information about Indigenous authors in Canada, as well as bibliographic information. So information about books, articles, published works written by Indigenous authors, also in Canada. So that's the type of data that we have in this project. So my updated vision statement really just kind of narrowed the scope to focus really only on the kind of the initial user group, which is looking at how to make this database more useful for researchers. In terms of the learning process, it has been important, as I just mentioned, to identify the audience. So, knowing that these different user groups, looking at, the academic users and users in community, that these user groups have different needs, um, and especially accessibility needs. And so, in thinking through kind of how to make the database more accessible to community members, that's something that I think is so, so important, and that I hope to kind of extend the work that I'm currently doing to deal with those questions in the future. Um, so when I say start at the beginning, in terms of my learning process, I had initially had the goal of um, doing consultations with allied colleagues, people working in kind of adjacent fields to Indigenous studies, to have consultations with them to walk through our current database. And I had initially planned to meet with these folks and kind of walk through the database. But in going through the OLS training, I realized that our project actually did not have a data management plan. And um, so, in realizing this, I thought at first, oh no, my project has gone completely off track. But as my mentor kind of reminded me, part of understanding the limitations of the database, which is what I set out to do, was identifying this lack of key piece, this data management plan. So even though it wasn't how I had imagined things going, I really kind of was still on track, even though this took me in a new direction. And then lastly, when I say, keep your circle open, I'm reflecting a bit here on the tendency in academia to keep our research circles kind of close, to want to protect what you're working on, and how this going through the OLS program has helped me understand the importance of really just keeping that circle wide open, asking for guidance from experts, from people that know more than you, reaching out to leaders in your field who may or may not have time to help you, but doing it anyway, and just generally kind of resisting that impulse to do things all on your own, and kind of being hard on yourself if you don't have all the answers. So kind of sitting in that not knowing and that vulnerability and that asking questions. In terms of progress, so initially I'd planned to have consultations with experts in the field to walk through the database, but as my project goals kind of shifted to focusing on creating that data management plan, I realized I wouldn't be ready to host these consultations until I had that kind of foundational piece completed, outlining the steps for long-term data preservation that also incorporated principles like OCAP and care and fair. So, with that in mind, I'm still doing that work of kind of surveying the field, looking for examples of data management plans working with Indigenous humanities data. And I'll admit, I haven't been able to find many examples to kind of work from that are dealing with these issues that I'm thinking through related to protocol around Indigenous data. But I have found the templates that are available on the Alliance website to be a useful starting point. I've also connected with colleagues in the library, specifically working in the area of research data management at my home institution to talk about the data that we're working with and to get some help creating that DMP. With the new kind of project focus, I met with my project team early in January, and we've set up some meetings in the coming weeks and months for kind of group work sessions to get things back on track with the database. I think it's really useful to have these team work sessions because, well, for many reasons, but especially when I'm working on something like the data management plan, I will inevitably run into very specific questions that I need, help finding answers for, asking things like, what are the metadata standards that we're using? All that, that key information that needs to be worked into the data management plan. So we've got those work sessions coming up to look forward to. In terms of open questions, if anyone has come across a sample data management plan that relates to Indigenous humanities data or that incorporates principles like OCAP, care, fair, please share. I'd love to see it. If anyone would like to be a test user of our updated database once it is complete, please let me know. This would involve having kind of an informal Zoom call with me. I'd walk you through the database and get your feedback. And this would probably be ready to happen in the next month or so. And then finally, and this is a really thorny question, are data preservation options for Indigenous communities, are these tools really open and accessible? So I want to point to a something that my mentor brought to my attention. So it's the official data submission policy for FERDR, for the Federated Research Data Repository in Canada, says the following about Indigenous data. Quote, Indigenous groups, including nations, communities, and organizations, are encouraged to contact the service to confirm their eligibility to submit content, unquote. So when I read that, I mean, I understand that in the case of Indigenous data, consultation and consensus with the community, that all needs to be reached and needs to happen in its own time. But I have to admit that this language and reading this statement really feels kind of like it's putting more of a roadblock for community rather than kind of an invitation to use these tools for sharing and preserving data. In terms of next steps, I need to continue working on the DMP for our project, sharing the draft DMP with our larger project team for some feedback, and also probably using resources with our institutional librarians for feedback as well. And then, once it's in good shape, have this published to our database so that it appears in context with the data itself. Once our database has gone through some planned updates that are coming in the next month, I hope to do some of that initial consultation that I had planned initially as part of the project, to meet with folks in aligned disciplines and get some feedback on database accessibility. And then in the spring, hopefully, I will be able to share some of my findings, my questions with other scholars at a conference in that setting. Acknowledgements. So there are so many people to thank. This is such an incredible opportunity to learn. So I want to extend my biggest thanks to Malvika and everyone at the OLS team, and thanks also to Gracielle, my mentor, Liv, who was a fellow champion and in my mentor group, and a shout out to our team, Post-its. Also, I'd like to thank Sophie and Deanna, my academic advisor and my EDIA mentor. I'd like to thank Susan Brown and the larger project team working with Quirk. So Quirk is kind of the larger home of our individual project. And then I'd also like to thank the Digital Research Alliance of Canada for providing this amazing opportunity. I ended that recording before I got to my last slide. So, if you want to keep in touch, or if you have any answers to the questions I've posed, or if you want to keep talking about these questions, please reach out. You can contact me by email, or through GitHub. Okay, thank you.